Okay, so I think we've got everybody admitted now. Are we good to go, Amanda? Okay, so I hope everybody can hear me nice and clear. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I know that the topic for our meeting this evening is one that has generated a lot of community interest, and I certainly understand why. I will share right off the top that I myself have had my own vehicle rummaged through in my driveway and some items taken. So I know that it's a concern across our neighborhood. So I'm experiencing it as your counselor too. And I want you to know that. So unfortunately, because we couldn't gather together, I did want to still provide an opportunity for people to hear from our police services, as well as to let the police services hear from the neighborhood. I hope folks have had a chance to use Zoom before, but if you haven't, I just want to go over a couple of things really quickly. At the bottom of your video screen, there is a little icon that shows reactions. And so as we get into the Q&A session, we are going to first use the chat function. So there's the chat button and the reactions button. I'm going to ask that as many people as possible type their question into the chat bar. We do have about 60 people in the room already, and we may have a few more joining us a bit later. So it would be hard to give everyone a chance to ask their question over audio, but if it's in the chat, it may help me coordinate 3 or 4 questions that are the same for our officers from the London Police Services to answer at once, rather than answering 3 or 4 questions that are very similar on similar topics together. I do understand that some people might not be comfortable with the chat feature, so I'm going to try and leave a little time at the end for those who want to use the chat, want to use an audio feature. And see a couple people holding their hands up to their ears, so I'm just going to increase my volume a little bit here, and hopefully you can hear me a little more clearly. As I was saying, I will understand some folks may be uncomfortable with the chat feature. So the reactions icon will let you, if you click on that, left click on it, there is a raise hand feature, and you'll be able to raise your hand, and that will put your name at the top of our list to unmute you for an audio question. But we're going to dive right in and start hearing from our police services representatives. So we have with us this evening Constable Fickling from the Core Unit, and PC Fountain from the Crime Prevention Unit. And we are going to turn it over to them to provide a little bit of a background on the situation from the police point of view and the things that we can do as a community to tackle some of the challenges that we are all experiencing as individuals. So thank you to both PC Fountain and Constable Fickling for joining us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. So my name's Leah. I work with the Community Oriented Response Unit. So the Core Unit builds partnerships with stakeholders like yourselves to collectively identify and combat chronic community issues that are typically non-emergent in nature. So we like to engage citizens and community groups to work collectively to solve these problems and encourage a sense of shared responsibility in our community and in your ward. So core officers are assigned to specific areas of the city. So I predominantly cover the east end of London. So essentially everything east of Highbury from Oxford to the highway. And I actually live in your ward in the Argyle area. So I can empathize with a lot of the issues that you're seeing, as myself and my partner have also had our vehicles rummaged through and had our share of property crimes. So I want to touch on a little bit about crime map statistics for your ward. So I'll let you know that thefts from motor vehicles for 2021 and thefts of motor vehicles, so stolen vehicles, have both been slightly up in 2021, and residential burglaries a tiny increase. Shoplifting has been significantly up, which is specific to a few large retail stores. This increase in property crimes has occurred during the pandemic across the city, not specific to Ward 2. It's been happening everywhere. And from that, I want to talk about the importance of reporting. So police activity or policing has come a long way in the last decade, and everything that we do is stats driven. So it's very important that everything gets reported, even if it's small or minuscule, so that we're aware of where trends are taking place and can direct our resources accordingly. So for example, we went out to a community not too long ago, where we went out to an area of the city that kind of stemmed from a complaint to the councillor. And when we looked at our crime stats, we actually weren't seeing property crimes occurring in that area. But then we attended approximately 110 houses on these two adjacent streets. And a lot of people reported to us during that time, oh, I actually had my vehicle broken into, I had my shed broken into, that sort of thing. And we actually didn't know about these things, so our statistics didn't reflect that. So because policing is stats driven, the more information that we have, the better we can direct our resources. And resources can mean anything from how many police officers work in a particular area of the city is designated by how many calls are accumulated or how many incidents occur in a particular area of the city. So reporting is super important. I think Kathy's going to talk a little bit about different ways to report.
Sure, I will.
You want to come back to it?
Sure. Well, I can talk about it. Sure, certainly. Yeah, my name's Kathy, and I've been an officer here. I'm just coming up on completing 29 years, so I've seen a lot of the changes. And I get the frustration, and I hear it from the people about, well, why make a report? What good does it do? The police aren't coming. And there was a time, honestly, like besides doing every single accident in the city, because we didn't even have a police reporting center, we would come. If your car got broken into, we would drive out in the morning, look at it and say, yes, your car's been broken into, and write out the information. We simply don't have the time to do that. It's not a good use of our time. With online reporting, and I'm assuming since you're on Zoom, you'd probably be willing to make an online report, although there are other options. Many things can be reported online. And by doing that, it's not just as if there's no investigation at all. It's just a more streamlined way of doing it for you and for us. Because if you want to report that someone broke into your car overnight and you want to wait for an officer to come, it can take a great length of time. Whereas you can go online, you can do it in your own time frame. It's just good to know that when you make the report, you'll be given what looks like a report number. It starts with a T and then a -21 and then some numbers. It is in fact just a tracking number, because what happens is you don't just make a report and it disappears into cyberspace, never to be looked at. There's officers that look at them as they come in and they take over the investigation from there. So if you reported and you've got a description, you've seen something, or neighbors told you they saw something, you have a camera, or your neighbors do, you have it on video, it will be investigated. Charges can be laid, whether an officer physically arrives there or not. So what'll happen is you make that initial report, an officer looks it over, they respond back to you if they need further information. Or say you make the report, you have no suspect information, you will get an email back saying, yes, this report's been accepted, everything is appropriate because you've given an email address, and this is your report number. And then the next day your neighbor says, oh, you know, my camera covers your driveway, I've got the suspect. You can go in, add a supplemental to your initial report. You can send us a picture out of that video. And if they recognize them, the people that work in this area, and they might very well recognize him or her, or if not, they put it on what we call the cork board, which is service-wide, so officers can all look at it, and if they can identify the person, and we do deal with a lot of the same people over and over, we'll put a warrant out and we will charge them. So without us ever arriving, it's not a waste of your time to make that report. Plus, as Leah said, it is very much stats-driven. We need to know what's happening. So besides theft from vehicles, online you can also make reports for property damage, thefts from sheds, thefts from detached garages, not an attached garage. If the garage is attached to your house, that becomes a break and enter, and we need to attend for that. Property damage, other things with regards to businesses can be reported as well. Lost property, right? You've lost your wallet. You don't need us to come and write down everything that you've lost. You can make that report online, and it's much quicker and better for you, and a better use of our time as well.
So I'll talk a little bit about some specific crime prevention measures, especially that I know are popular complaints and our property crimes are popular at this time. So specifically property crimes against vehicles. And I know some of this you've probably heard again and again, but it is really important and they're things that we do forget about. So keeping valuables out of sight, and better yet, just out of your vehicle in general. And this includes even things that you might not think about, like designer sunglasses or sunglasses that might in the dark be interpreted as designer sunglasses. Tim Hortons, like gift cards, that stuff is, even if it doesn't seem like much to you, it's attractive enough for someone to smash your window and take your items. Do not leave your registration, ownership, or your garage door opener inside the vehicle. And most importantly, don't leave it in sight. It's very easy for someone to break into your vehicle, then hit your garage door opener, and now they're into your home, and that's escalated. Do not leave the keys in the vehicle, and do not leave the vehicle running unattended. This one is a really big one. We find people doing a lot, and a lot of stolen vehicles are the result of keys being left in the vehicle. Never leave your children unsupervised or unattended in the vehicle. We've had vehicle thefts where the intention is not to take a child, but a child in the vehicle. That's super high risk. Lock your vehicles windows up, and if you can park it in a well-lit area, that's preferable.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly what Leah was saying. And just to add to that about the garage door opener, we used to have one of the little ones that clip onto your sun visor. And because my husband has the garage so full of stuff, we can't park in it anyway. There wasn't a real use for it, but to come and go, we used to have it. So I didn't want to leave it in the car, parked even at a mall, but specifically in front of our own house. So I was taking it out and keeping it in my purse. So, finding anything in your purse is next to impossible. Plus, it would always be being hit when I didn't want to. So he found online, it's just like, it looks like a little fob, like you would use to start your car or open your car door. And it can be easily programmed to open your garage doors as well. So they're handy, they're not that expensive. And that way you don't even have to think about whether you've left your garage door opener or where to keep it, because that way it's always on your keychain. So I just want something to add to that. And as you were saying about not only items that are valuable, but look valuable. I used to argue with my teenage son that his backpack only had books, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, yeah, well, your book's gonna cost me a $400 window when they think it's a laptop or something more important. So absolutely don't leave anything in your vehicles. And I know it can become a big issue, especially if they're work vehicles and there's tools and things. And it's a lot of effort to remove them on a daily basis, but think of it as extra steps or exercise, because it's a lot easier to do that than it is to replace them. So as a crime prevention officer, I wear many different hats. I'm in charge of our volunteer officers, our auxiliary officers. That's a big part of my job. But one of the other things I do are home safety audits. And normally we do those, we do them for businesses as well, and we call them SEPTEDs. But for a home safety audit, normally when we're asked to do that, there's been a break-in that's left the people particularly fearful. And I'm not underestimating that any break-in is stressful, but some are much more stressful, or often with regards to domestic violence. So we feel, based on what we know, that the victim, he or she, is in danger in their residence. So when we go and we do these home safety audits, the advice we give them is very transferable to what you can use to secure your own home against thefts and break-ins as well. So I don't know if, did you refer to the website? We have londonpolice.ca is our website, really easy. londonpolice.ca. It has a lot of information. It has how you can make reports right on the front page, including step-by-step to make the online reports and all your different options. It also has a section on crime prevention. And on the crime prevention section, right as soon as you hit crime prevention, home safety, to the left, there's a place that talks about a home safety audit, and you can fill it out and do one yourself. But I'll go through it with you now, just in that way, if you have questions about it, you can ask. So starting from the outside, whether it's an apartment or a townhouse or a standalone house, They're all treated similarly, but what you want to make sure is from the street or the parking lot that the visibility to the doors is good, that there's a lot of room for natural surveillance. So people that are there legitimately, you know, on the street, driving around, doing day-to-day activities can see the front of your residence. So for that, we talk about landscape, and we talk about trimming trees high. So the trunk is all that you can see for several feet, so it's harder for people to hide behind, either to cause you problems as you're coming and going, or to hide behind and break into your house. And we talk about trimming shrubs and bushes and things down low, again, so people can't hide behind them, or they can't use those to mask themselves as they break into a window. Lighting is important. Motion detector lighting. If you're sitting in your home and a light pops on, you're much more likely to pay attention than if the light's already on and nothing has attracted your attention to it. So having the light pop on, I mean, you can't get to the point where every time a raccoon walks by, you're nervous, but it will attract attention. And plus the person out there doesn't know if someone's turned the light on or who has noticed this light coming on. So specifically with people that are having problems with their vehicles, and as Leah was saying, I do have empathy for you. Between my husband and I, we had our vehicles broken into 9 times. So I do feel your pain. It was over many years, but all in London. But ultimately with the lighting, especially where you park your vehicle, if it can't be secured in a garage, make sure the lighting is good on it. And you can consider alarms on your car as well. You can have solar lighting now if you want to have lighting in the back of your yard or around detached sheds or garages that, you know, you don't have to have electricity out there. They're motion detector and powered by solar. They're very easy to purchase and to use, and they're getting less and less expensive. So good lighting and trimming the hedges and the trees and things as far as the outside goes. The main way someone is going to break into your home is going to be through a door or a window. So windows, crank windows, right? Or casement windows. The crank windows is not a lot you can do to secure them, but they're already quite secure. I can't remember taking a report that was a break-in through a crank window that was closed and locked. The only thing you really can do to add to the security is an alarm that sticks on it that is triggered by motion, right? All these items I'm going to recommend are fairly inexpensive and available in normal times through Canadian Tire, Home Depot, places like that, or on Amazon. But for other windows that slide, if they slide side to side, you can put a stick on the track. Okay, so if you picture a window sliding like this, if the one is fixed and the other one slides, you want a stick that's simply going to stop the one that moves. Right? You don't want to jam a stick in there, because if you need to get out in a fire or an emergency, you want to be able to remove that stick, but you want it in there. You know, you can paint it white so it blends in, it doesn't even show. And if the windows are double sliders, you need the end of the stick to catch the lip of the second window. So, you know, I've gone to homes where they say, oh, look, I've got a stick. And I'm like, yes, but I can just slide the window the other way over the stick. So you want it to catch both directions. And then you can put a contact alarm on that window, and they are not expensive. I was looking just before Christmas on Amazon, and they were 10 individual alarms for $20, and they come with batteries. They come with two-way tape. So what you would do is you would stick part of it on the window and part of it on the frame. They don't have to be touching, but they have to be close. Got an on and off switch. You turn it on and you move the window while the alarm is on. The magnetic connection breaks, and it's a very loud noise. It's not monitored, obviously, but it doesn't have to be wired in. But when someone trying that window hears that alarm, it warns yourself, perhaps neighbors, depending on the time of year, and also they don't know if it's a monitored alarm or not. So between putting the stick in the track and having the alarm, and sticks can also work if the windows slide up and down as well, because you can place a stick to stop it. So that means if someone wants to come in, they literally have to break the glass and reach in through broken glass to remove the stick, and then there'll be an alarm going off as well, which makes it a lot more complicated, because most people's windows, mine included, the actual lock that comes with the windows are pretty easy to break with a screwdriver or something. So those are the majority of the ways people secure their windows. And then doors, if you have glass around your door or in your door, depending on where it is, some of the doors have just a small, like half moon of glass, very high, nobody could reach in. But if there's glass in the middle or glass on the sides, you might want to consider a product called glass laminate. It's best if it's installed professionally. Most glass companies will, and most will give you a free estimate. It doesn't stop the glass from breaking because it's a seal that goes on the inside, but it stops someone from being able to reach through and undo your locks, right? So if you have glass laminate on any windows, that protects you from that. If you happen to have a window in the door that slides up and down, you'd use the same means as you would for any other window with a stick in the track. Another thing for your doors is what's holding your door shut is your deadbolt. I have been to some homes where they don't even have deadbolts on their exterior doors. They have the little locks that you'd use on a washroom. Those are no good. Even me at my age could kick open that door. So you want a deadbolt, and what's holding the deadbolt in place is the strike plate that's on the frame of the door. So if you look at almost any door and you open it up, where the deadbolt goes in is your strike plate, and it can have, a lot of them will just have 2 holes for screws and very small little screws, and that's all that's holding your door shut. So a larger strike plate with longer screws, right? Like if you've got glass on the other side, it's harder because of the seal, but for most, especially older homes, the doors are framed by 2x4s. You can put very long screws in at angles, and you can get a strike plate that holds 4 screws or 6 screws. If you're not able to change it, at least reverse those small screws and add larger screws. If you're particularly fearful, or say you have a back door that you think is a weak spot to getting into your home, or it's a people door into the garage, you can get a door holding device. It's kind of like a fancy version of the chair that would go under the doorknob on the TV movies, or like a club we used to use on our cars. It's got a C cup on the top that goes under the doorknob, and then it goes down to the floor. So the door and the floor and this device make a triangle. So sometimes they're called Davy bars or door holding devices. They're roughly $35. Once they're adjusted once, and you have them set so they're a certain distance from the floor, from the base of the door out. Once it's adjusted once, you can just move it, set it in and out. You can put it away when you don't want to use it. You can take it with you if you move. We've had times when we've had warrants and we're trying to get into a place and they have one of those, and depending on how well it's working, we could have to get a ram to open that door because the force is driven down to the floor. It's better on hard floor than it is on carpet. Those are ways of securing your doors. Alarm systems are another option. With regards to garages, as Leah said, really important, people don't have access to your garage, because if you think about it, once they're in the garage, they shut the door. You've now probably provided them with tools that they can use to work on the door from the garage to your house. And once the doors are shut, even if they're making noise, people can't tell where the noise is coming from or what's happening. So if you have a people door, a single door, like from the backyard or the side of the garage into the garage, you want to make sure that's just as secure as your front or your back door. And that can be done with a door holding device and the same items I mentioned. If by some chance you do have a garage door opener go missing, until you can change the frequency of the opener, you can simply unplug the whole thing, right? If you're going away, you're concerned about it. If you just unplug it, they can't open it. Alarms can be used on the doors that go from outside into the house as well. If your backyard has gates, you might want to consider locking the gate, but a way that would allow you a quick escape from the backyard, but just something so that someone trying to get into your backyard would have to climb the fence. Because people driving by, walking, they don't notice somebody walking along your house and going into the yard, but everybody, even subconsciously, catches people climbing, right? It's an abnormal movement. If you spend a lot of time in your backyard, you might want to have a bell or something on the gate. You could let you know someone's coming in. Always keep your front door locked. If you're in the, like at all times, I lock my door all the time, but especially if you're in your backyard and front doors are left unlocked. As far as home security goes, I mean, there's a lot more information on our website, and I don't want to monopolize this whole speech, but I would put anything of particular value, jewelry, passports, currency, make sure they're well hidden, or very important documents such as wills and things. It's always not a bad idea, a fireproof safe, or have things stored offsite like a safety deposit box. Get to know your neighbors. Once you feel that you can trust them, you know, you should be each other's eyes and keep an eye on each other's places. If you go away, if COVID ever ends and we actually go away again, make sure someone is keeping the grass cut or the snow shoveled and picking up the mail and all those common things that you would want taken care of. I'm sure there's going to be more questions, and I don't want to keep talking, but those are just some ways that you can protect your residents. If you're in an apartment building, consider the common area of the building as part of your home, right? So you wouldn't open your front door in a standalone house and let someone just walk in your home. We shouldn't be opening the door or properly opening doors. If you have controlled entry, once they pass that controlled entry, that's a common area that's shared by tenants and guests that you shouldn't be letting other people in. And if other people are propping open doors or doing that, you should talk to the building manager about that, because you should be able to feel safe within your building. But that being said, if you ever leave your apartment, even just to go to a laundry room or a friend's place, you should be locking your doors always. And if someone is at your apartment and they've called to say they're coming up, or you buzz them in, what I used to do when I had roommates is you buzz in your roommate, you'd flick the deadbolt, leave the door cracked open, and go back to what you were doing so the person who was coming can get in. I was involved in a case where a woman did that exact thing, and unfortunately it was a domestic situation, and the ex was in a nearby stairwell, and he took advantage of that situation to come in to the unit, and it became a very, very serious set of circumstances because she was expecting the friend, but he got in there first. So in an apartment, always use your peephole, always make sure you can see who's there. And in a home, if you don't have a peephole, a nearby window or a glass to the door or something, make sure you know who you're opening the door to, right? Did you have more to talk about, or?
No, I think we can open up to questions if that's where you'd like to go, Shawn.
Okay, well, we've got quite a few questions and comments already from our chat box from folks, so I appreciate people doing that. And I'm going to start posing some of these to you and give you a chance to respond to some of them. And I've been trying to group them and highlight them. And if people wonder why I'm looking off screen, I've got a big chat bar over here so I can follow the chat, and then everyone in front of me so I can see your faces too. I'm going to start with one that came up very early, and it was repeated a few times. And you had mentioned it as well in terms of reporting. When there is an incident, the questions are, I'm going to just read them together. How valuable are the video clips or photos of the incident? Do you recommend notifying insurance as well? And for the neighbors to be aware of situations in the neighborhood, do you encourage or discourage pictures of perpetrators being posted on social media sites and neighborhood apps and things like that?
Sure. So I'll start backwards here, I guess. For the Facebook can be tricky. Sometimes it helps with identifying people, but you have to know that for criminal proceedings to go forward, identification has to be very specific on how that ID was determined. So for someone on Facebook who says this looks like so-and-so, or I think it's so-and-so, sometimes we lose our evidence because it's been polluted. So it's not to say you can't do that. I really can't give a black and white answer on the Facebook ID.
You want to make sure, that, posting something of someone breaking into a car is one thing. Posting people walking down the street that you think are suspicious might end up with you being the one to be getting yourself in a situation. But the video clips themselves are very important, especially and cameras are getting better and better all the time, especially if we can see their faces or identify them. And one thing we hadn't, and I'm jumping in here, but with not only reporting crimes after they've happened, what's really important is to report suspicious people. And I know, as I said, this is a flurry of typing that I did it and nobody came. And I know, I bet you they're clicking in as I say that. But there's a few things to mention here, because I know there's frustration about call time and responding to calls. But when you report a suspicious person, and you give us a description, and they're walking up and down driveways, or they're trying car handles, door handles, and you don't see a cruiser there in the next little while, you feel like it was just a waste of your time, but it's not. We need to know, we can't always make it right there. We don't always have the people power available to go, but you may not realize that an unmarked car came into the neighborhood that you weren't aware of, or that, you know, you gave us a clothing description and you waited half an hour, you never saw an officer, they disappeared, but we got them 2 streets over, right? You wouldn't know that, right? So it is important to report suspicious people. And if it's a crime in progress, if they're trying door handles, if they're committing a crime at the time, it's a 911 call, right? We didn't actually touch on the different ways to contact the police, but making online reports and things when crimes have happened. But basically we have the non-emergency number, which you can post, Councillor, but also 911 if it's a crime in progress. And what's really important is 2 things. If it is a 911 call, and even if it's a medical emergency or something, there's 2 people that you're dealing with when you call 911. You're dealing with the call taker who's talking to you and the dispatcher. So if you're calling and I'm the call taker and I'm talking to you and I'm asking you a bunch of questions and you're like, stop asking me questions, just send me help. The call taker is actually typing in what you're saying. It's going to the dispatcher who's talking to the officer. So do know that they're not waiting until they stop talking to you to get you help, that it is happening. And I think it's important people understand that sometimes calling us back if the situation has changed, right? So if it's escalated or de-escalated or left, it's important that we're told. So if we have a call of someone, you know, acting suspiciously, walking up and down a street, checking out driveways or in and out of driveways, and you call us, but now you've heard breaking glass or they kicked the door open. Well, that's a whole different set of circumstances. And you want to call back and update us that things have changed. So that's important.
The video and photos in general is great evidence, and sometimes we don't see results immediately. So we've had lots of cases where we've had multiple suspicious person calls and all the photos come together at some point and we realize we have the same person in multiple incidents. You just don't always get that immediate, it doesn't come up immediately who that person is, or we link multiple photos together because they're committing the same type of crime, like a break and enter to a vehicle, that sort of thing. But photo evidence is really great. We post those images out to our officers. Lots of our foot patrol officers are very familiar with our continual subjects. Lots of officers on the street who work in a specific area can identify people. So that evidence is great, and sometimes it helps us down the road.
So one of the follow-up questions as you were answering that was how do citizens get the video or the photos to you? And is it an online submission? Some of the video files can obviously be very large in some of the security software, and they might not be able to be sent through easily online. So how should that be shared with?
Well, it depends on how they originally reported it. If it is like a theft from a vehicle and it's an online report, they can walk you through to how to just take an image out of the video and send it, because it's the image that we would post to have officers identify that person, an officer that can go to court and take the stand and say, yes, I know that person, this is who it is. And then we would get a copy of the whole video for court purposes once the person's identified. If you say it's a break into your home and an officer's attending, if possible, they can get it on a thumb drive when they're there, or an officer can come back and pick it up at another time. Everything's complicated a little bit by COVID. At one time, it could have been dropped off as well, but that's a little more complicated.
Our officers that work, that attend to those online calls too, just because you report online doesn't mean that we can't still send someone out to get video or retrieve something, or it doesn't mean that if you gather more information and later we determine that an officer needs to attend your house, just because you've reported online doesn't prevent us from doing that. It is still an active and important investigation.
Mm-hmm. And just to add really quickly, I thought of it when Leo was speaking about, you know, sometimes the results aren't seen right away. That's also with regards to DNA. If there's a break and enter and there's DNA left, whether they've left cigarette butts or drank your beer or cut themselves on your windows, it can be years later, right? The person it'd be filed and it would be kept, and their DNA profile a match is made when they are convicted of a crime and they have to give a sample. And that can happen. A lot of people want to know why we don't take DNA from thefts from vehicles. It's just because the Center of Forensic Sciences does not have the capacity to process that many samples. So that's why they draw the line at break and enters.
So there are a whole lot of comments all sort of related to the general topic of people's personal safety and patrol volumes and things like that. And I know that you can't speak to any particular individual incident, and I know that also for operational security, you can't necessarily say how many cars would be in an area at any given time, or officers on duty in an area at any given time. But to give you a flavor of some of the concerns here, there's a sense that there is an increase in problem in the area right now. Why are there not more cars patrolling visibly in the area throughout the day? It's not just at nighttime, turning on the lights. Sometimes we have cars being stolen at 2:30 in the afternoon when we're in the backyard. That Argyle Mall has become unsafe. People who are panhandling and hanging out there are also roaming the subdivision, and they are gathering at the mall, but the police don't come and patrol unless they're called. So there are those kind of questions, and along with that is we hear a lot about what we can do for ourselves in our homes, but what are the police doing when there's a chronic or repeat offender in multiple neighborhoods, in multiple cameras? It feels like even if they're caught, they're back out the next day stealing or vandalizing. What are the police doing to deter the repeat seemingly fearless offenders out there?
So I'll address the first part. I think Kathy's going to talk a little bit about perceived punishment and whatnot, consequence of crime. But for the first part, just talking about what the police are doing. So unfortunately, we are restricted by the number of officers that we have. And again, I can't speak to how many officers are employed by London Police or how that number is determined. But the city is actually broken up into specific areas, and officers on a given shift work an area of the city. And unless this is extreme emergency, they patrol that area of the city. And I know some of you are asking, how does the number of incidents that I've reported change where our resources go? So that's a big part of it, is that we might designate this many officers for this area of the city and maybe less for a different area of the city based on how much crime is happening there and how many incidents are being reported. And so that's a part of the reporting piece. So it's not to say that this area of the city is not getting as much attention. Officers are directed to a specific area and they do work that area for their shift. And then beyond that, the calls are triaged by importance. So unfortunately, if something really big is happening in your area of the city, that those officers may be pulled to that call. Whereas in another area of the city, maybe someone's doing a break and enter report because they're not being pulled on a bigger call in their area, if that makes sense.
So I'm just going to do a follow-up on that because it's one that people are interested in hearing about. And I think that this is probably something you can answer without addressing operationally sensitive details. So in the past month, according to the LPS crime stats, there have been 490 theft incidents of all types across London. 395 were within 2 miles of East Lions Park. As a result, has there been an increased level of policing in the East End? So
I believe that what that's referring to is our Argyle Mall area is going to skew those stats because of the retail there. And we have had a significant increase in shoplifting occurrences during the pandemic, which is going to create a hotspot in the Argyle Mall and surrounding area for theft. It's not necessarily saying that those are thefts from outside of that.
The Home Depot and the liquor store in particular.
Well, with my neighbor being an employee at the liquor store, I know that they've got lots of problems there. I hear it from her all the time when she gets home from work. So I know that would certainly skew the statistics a little bit.
And to follow up on the question about what are we doing, when they're prolific or repeat offenders, they're not being kept in. I'll be totally honest. When you say overnight, that's not happening at all. They're likely being released by the officer on the street. It changed back in January of 2020 with Bill C-45, where officers can release with conditions. So it's totally changed the dynamics of how people are being released. They're being released by the officer with conditions. And then the COVID has just increased the situation. But just to put things in perspective, when we're talking about property crimes, and I'm not by any means dismissing the seriousness of them, and when you don't feel safe in your own neighborhood and you don't, you have to worry about your property, I'm not making light of that whatsoever. But today, as I'm preparing for this talk, I'm looking at the newspaper, and in Toronto 2 weeks ago, there were 2 adult offenders who are robbing a bank with weapons. They're suspected in a string of bank robberies. They had weapons, they had disguises. They, as part of their crime and being apprehended, they stabbed 2 officers, one narrowly missing their heart. The officers are both still off work. The one person was released within 24 hours, and the second one, who is facing an attempt murder charge for stabbing the officer, has been released as well on bail. So just to put it in perspective.
That's despite police.
Oh, we say not to,
period.
right? Like, it's not, we don't make the decision about who gets kept in custody. If we keep someone in for a bail hearing and we say, you know, please keep them in, it's the courts that decide that, and their hands are tied, and it's exacerbated by the pandemic as well. But I understand the frustration. I absolutely do.
And that feeds into the next sort of set of comments that people have been offering and questions that they've been offering. Deb mentioned that when they lived in Victoria, they had some neighbors who organized as volunteers and drove around in their cars at night just patrolling. They stayed in Paris for safety and just reported suspicious activity. Is there any sort of citizens on patrol, neighborhood watch, volunteer work that people can do to assist in helping make the community feel safer? And related to that is, what do they do when, there's a crime in progress and they're witnessing it? Should they be following the perpetrator? Can they make a citizen's arrest? What kind of things can they do to help?
Our recommendation, first of all, Neighborhood Watch is up and running, right? And their website is available. If you choose to make a group, studies have shown that in areas that have Neighborhood Watch, and these are studies that have been run by insurance companies, crime does go down. And it's a way of people connecting with each other. And I mean, it's somewhat been replaced by Facebook sites and things and groups, but Neighborhood Watch is still there. We don't have any affiliation. Well, we with any citizens on patrol group, I mean, the issue would be safety, obviously, first and foremost. And I would never recommend approaching someone who's committing a crime, calling us. And I know the response time, depending on what's happening, but when there's a crime in progress, like Leah was saying, things are triage. So depending on what else is happening and where we are, and if there's a threat to somebody, the response is going to be there, but to still call things in. But having people out, it just complicates matters. They can become victims, and people that are out thinking they're going to, take matters into their own hand, they tend to react. I mean, we certainly are encouraging people when they see something, but when you're out driving around looking for things, and then they get involved with it, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in those scenarios, including people getting hurt.
So I'm going to come back to a couple of the, because we do have a couple more of these, and around the property crimes issue. And one of the comments was, how do we report an attempted theft or an activity in progress where someone has entered, for example, a sun porch, but didn't steal anything? There doesn't seem to be a category for that online. How do we report that so that you're aware that it's happened?
So like a sunroom, I'm assuming that's attached to your home. So that's a residential break and enter. That would be a phone into the police and you would be added to the queue. Unfortunately, you may wait some time depending on how many calls are in our queue that day and what the response time is. But because a sunroom is attached to your home, that is a break and enter that needs to be reported. An officer does need to come out and have a look at that. If it was like a detached shed and you don't have any suspect information, you don't have any video or anything like that, or a detached garage like Kathy had mentioned before, you can report those types of thefts online, or it can be as property damage or as a theft, depending what exactly is going on. And again, those online reports feed our stats feed what police officers do, where they go, etc., because stats-driven policing is evidence-based policing.
And if I could just add as well, there is a different offense for trespassing by night. So trespassing is a provincial offense, much like a seatbelt ticket. But if you're trespassing near a dwelling house, right, so a residence between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., that is a criminal offense. So the person in your backyard, they don't have to be breaking into your house, but they're around your dwelling, because the law recognizes a dwelling is more, I don't want to use the word sacred, but that's where people are residing, right? So there's a upped offense there. So the trespassing by night is a criminal offense.
Wow, that's something I wasn't aware of either. So that's an interesting piece of information, that so it would be treated as a slightly elevated situation than if it was a trespassing at night. When we have, sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes here again. And again, this kind of relates to the sunroom question as well. And back to one of the very early comments, why is a detached garage or a shed not considered a break and enter if it's properly secured? The same way that an attached is.
It's kind of more just words that we're using here. You can still call it a break and enter, just our terminology for coding things. But the detached more so is more so clear cut as a property crime, whereas attached to the house, now we're talking about humans getting involved. People likely, the fact that the offender would likely know that somebody lives in there. That kind of differentiates it, but you can still call it a break and enter. Just we sometimes use specific terminology for how we code things for our statistics, that sort of thing.
And it goes with the trespassing at night. You cannot be charged with trespassing at night near a business, even if it's a closed business, because it's a business, whereas your dwelling is your home, your residence. So a shed or a garage that's not attached, but they draw the line, because I mentioned earlier, there's a big difference in the trauma level of break-ins, right? I went and did a home safety audit for an elderly man who'd had a break-in. He was clearly home during COVID, during lockdown. They broke in, they spent a great deal of time. His bedroom door was shut, but they would have known. They went through every other room in the house. They had a weapon, they used a weapon, they were there, they stole his vehicle. Compare that to someone who's, gone to the grocery store, left the garage open, and someone walks in and grabs a bike. I mean, they're both break and enters, but just to make it clearer, we've defined break-ins as anything to do with the residence itself, including the garage that's attached.
Do you want to touch on notifications for crime maps? Someone was just asking.
Oh, crime maps. Yeah, sorry. So crime maps, again, getting back to londonpolice.ca, that website, right on the very front page, down on the bottom right, is a little icon you can click on that says crime maps. And basically, it's very easy to use. You just have to agree to a couple of things and you can get into it. And you can get into your area of the city or any area of the city. And there's specific things you can see: theft from vehicles, theft of vehicles, arsons, break and enters, robberies. Again, the data is only as good as what's being reported. If you report today there's been a break into your house, we're not going to put a little icon on your house. It'll be that general area. But it lets you know what's happening. It's 90 days. So today, what was reported 90 days ago will drop off and today's stats will be added. You can also ask for notification. You can go in and say, there's a little video that shows you embedded in the crime map that shows you how to use it, but you could say, I want to get a notification every time this happens within a mile or 5 miles of my home or my business or my children's school, or I want to know the day it happens, or I want a monthly list given to me, and it can be emailed to you as well, or you can go in and take a look at them. And that will help you realize what's going on, and more importantly, what's being reported.
And Amanda has shared the link in the chat box for everybody if they want to visit that link. We will be sending a post-meeting email around everybody too, and I'll make sure to include that link as well as the online reporting link and the link to the home safety audit information too, so that people have it at their fingertips and they don't have to worry if they didn't have a chance to copy and paste it from the chat box tonight. There is some frustration and some comments in the chat box, and I want to put this to both of you, and perhaps you can address it as much as you can, understanding that, again, there are some operational things that we don't divulge because we don't want the word to get back to the bad guys in the first place. So there's a sense that sometimes people feel when reporting an occurrence, the officer or the dispatcher is treating it like it's not a good use of their time, or that there is never any follow-up to the report that was made. 2 and 3 months later, I still haven't heard back from anyone, as well as the comment around, the only place we see a patrol car is sitting in the church/school parking lot. And why aren't they patrolling more, or why, as well as why aren't there foot patrols more in some of the areas? So I wonder if you can just address in general terms, knowing that you can't talk about officer compliments on any given shift, how those situations might be being addressed by our police service.
Sometimes it's frustrating because we don't always, citizens don't always know how their information is being used. So we take that information in and it drives our stats, or it becomes a part of an active investigation that that suspect is a suspect in multiple things. And unfortunately, because of the sheer number of us and the number and the amount of crime that happens, we cannot get back to every single person. And we can't show up to every single door for every single call. And that doesn't mean that it's not important to us. It's literally us making the best use of London Police resources. So doing things online, or doing, sometimes even with COVID, we do things over the phone to decrease your risk of exposure. And that's not because it's not important to us. Like, these crime happens to everyone. Our friends and family are impacted in the same way. We are out here doing our best for you with the limited resources that we have based on the amount of crime that's happening. And just an add-on to the cars in parking lots, policing, again, very evidence-based, and we have to justify extremely every single move we make, and we have to document everything we do, and to ensure that all of your policing is evidence-based and that we are accountable to everything we do. So when you're seeing an officer in a parking lot, they're likely typing a report, accounting for something that they just did, making notes, or they may be preparing to go for a call. So they're completing some checks to see what kind of situation they're getting themselves into to keep you safe and to keep them safe.
No, that's very well said. One thing we haven't really touched on is one of the big changes in the directions of policing internationally and in London as well is called problem-oriented policing, POP. And what we have now here are crime analysis. And of course, the word analysis tells you what they do. They are some of the ones that have provided us some of the information we referred to tonight. So they, based on statistics and where the problems are, it goes to our problem-oriented policing team who decide where to have projects. Like right now, I'm part of the downtown project because of the numbers of break-ins to businesses downtown, which has dramatically increased. Actually, residential break-ins have decreased, and the downtown ones, especially with the lockdowns and such. So I'm doing the CEPTEDS, crime prevention through environmental design, something like a home safety audit for businesses, sometimes several a day. So that's something that we're doing based on the reports that we are getting. So again, just to stress, I know you're probably tired of the word stats, but our crime analysis will be looking and they'll say, look, there's a problem with break-ins. Like they would say, when the students are leaving at Christmas a couple of years ago, the break-ins are really going up there. So we went out with my volunteers, we went door to door to give them the information and tell them to take their property home and how to secure their homes based on where the problems are. So that's just one more reason why reporting things and letting us know what's happening and making complaints to the counselors and letting people know what's going on that's the use of the resources. But honestly, it's not unusual now. Officers work 12-hour shifts to have 0 patrol time in 12 hours. No use being dishonest. I mean, they're out there, they're going from call to call to call. I'm out there doing a different type of job, but I hear them on the air and you hear, can someone clear? And so there'll be officers are on a call, they leave to go to the emergency, then they want to go back on that call. Sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 half completed calls, paperwork not done, things not finished because they're clearing for emergencies, and then they go back on their other calls. It's not unusual to have a 12-hour shift with no time to patrol. So that would be an answer why you're not seeing cars driving around patrolling.
Well, I can attest to that myself, having done a 12-hour ride along, and there was certainly at no point during the shift that I worked alongside one of the sergeants, at no time were there fewer than 40 calls waiting for an answer. And that was the low point. There were times at different periods in the evening where they were much higher volume. So
those are calls, sorry, I was just saying, those are calls that's already been determined an officer needs to attend, right? So those aren't calls that can be done online or can be done by phone. Those are calls that are waiting. And I've come into work and seen over 90 calls of people waiting for an officer to come. And it's not static, right? As that's happening, more calls are coming in. And you get one severe accident with a fatality or something, and there's 10 officers, closing down roads and taking over. And it just means people are going to wait longer. I mean, my son was involved in a hit and run accident where he was mildly injured, and it was days later, we were still waiting for an officer to come to the house. So I feel your frustration.
Another question that's related to, and there was you've actually made a couple of comments about the COVID situation. And certainly we have had a couple of the low-cost motel, hotel rooms being used as COVID isolation spaces for folks experiencing homelessness. Has this pandemic situation in the last year impacted the hotspot zones in any way, and have you seen a correlation with those resting spaces and the crime rates?
I
know it's kind
we
of
didn't ask for those stats to be brought in.
That might be a difficult stat to generate too, to isolate that specific thing in general, because the pandemic itself also creates a huge difference in reporting and information and how that is read through. I'm kind of getting into statistical analysis now, but it might be hard to isolate if that's specifically changing the area. And sometimes, unfortunately, we might not even know that until sometime after, which is.
I mean, I think it's safe to say the pandemic has impacted everyone's mental health, and certainly the mental health of the most vulnerable in the city, absolutely, and the homelessness, and that definitely could be correlated to an increase of property time, and certainly an increase in our time being used for those
things
situations.
Like the motels being used as those isolation spaces. It's not taken lightly, and it's not like we just tried to drop a bunch of people in a general area, and like it wasn't even the police specifically that generated that. But it's a solution to a problem that didn't just come out of nowhere, and it wasn't just a quick solution. So I know a lot of thought went into what could be done, and it's to mitigate a bigger risk, unfortunately.
Right, and I know there's several areas of the city where that are being utilized for this.
Yeah.
So another question that's come up is, with the demands on everyone's time, are the police looking at options to utilize police cadets, reserve officers, people in that sort of, even perhaps security certified individuals to help relieve some of the pressure on some of the low priority or the non-urgent matters, or even with the, I'm going to call social workers, who might be partnered with police to deal with some of the mental health issues. Are those, and I know even from a council perspective that those are some ongoing discussions, certainly in terms of social service supports, but with folks with more of the security and policing background, or the cadets who maybe need some on-the-job experience, is the London Police Force utilizing those resources right now? Or are there considerations being given to do that?
So our cadets don't carry the same use of force as London police officers do, so they cannot respond to calls on the street. And although sometimes we say a call may seem like it's low risk, but for us, all calls have the potential to be high risk. So if we say a cadet could go potentially deal with maybe like a homeless person who's just hanging around an area and we want them removed. Well, if that homeless person then has been using drugs and they overdose, or they have a weapon on them, that changes the situation. Or if that cadet is perceived to be a police officer, the expectations on them might be different. So our cadets aren't used out in the community for that purpose. However, again, like sometimes it's hard to think about all the other things that are upon us, but our cadets are being drawn upon a lot right now for pandemic purposes, specifically for helping control spread within our organization. So they're doing a lot of the screening of people coming to the police station, things like that. So they're helping in a lot of ways that like we've used them really uniquely than we have in the past. It's just things that you might not necessarily see.
Yes. And then our auxiliary officers that I mentioned are an amazing group of volunteers, some of which have volunteered with us for over 25 years, but they have a level of training that like we couldn't draw from other segments of society. They've the backgrounds and the training and the process that gets them hired to us on the ongoing annual requalification, because they do carry handcuffs and a baton, but they are volunteers. And due to the pandemic, we've limited their involvement partly for their safety, obviously, as volunteers, and also we're very much trying to limit the number of people coming into the building to stop the spread. So we've used them very, very sparingly since the pandemic, including the training is all on Zoom and everything. So there are other resources that are limited. And when we do use auxiliaries, I mean, they do ride along, so they're an extra body in a vehicle, but if it's a 2-officer call, we still need 2 officers, whether there's an auxiliary there or not. We use them for crime prevention purposes, for searches. They're better search trained than most officers. So we do use them, but that is also being impacted by the pandemic. And we can't just, tap some people that work in a different industry that's similar and then give them powers or be responsible for them, for their safety or their actions. So that wouldn't work.
You kind of touched on there, like different services and whatnot. And it's not to say because we're not doing something, it's not something that we might entertain in some capacity in the future. And we're always looking at changing things and how can we respond appropriately as society changes. So even just on that note, London Police recently developed and is kind of in the working phases of a COAST team, which is essentially to target the huge mental health crisis that's happening in London and surrounding areas. And so they've paired up officers with community organizations, nurses, Canadian mental health, paramedics to respond to calls that are of a lesser nature. Again, we still need a police officer going to those calls because of the risk, but we're drawing other resources to share that responsibility because we've noticed the mental health crisis and that we need to find alternative ways to adapt right now because, again, the calls are just outrunning us.
And I belong to a table that's 30 different community groups together, and we bring forward people that are at extreme risk, and then whoever can help out of that group helps. And that's something that's new as well, but that can also help, fix the problem and stop the problem within the community as well. So we're trying different things, but those are good ideas, and we appreciate people's suggestions and thinking out of the box, but there's always issues with different solutions.
Well, and something that was shared in the comment in the chat box that I think is really, really important to share with you, and I think that all of us would agree, nobody's questioning your commitment to the community or the commitment to your fellow officers. There's a recognition that a lot of these situations are frustrating. I've seen a number of comments about, it's the same 20, 30 people in the neighborhood who seem to be the source of the problems. And, it's not your decision on whether or not they end up being incarcerated. That's a justice system issue. And so we do want you to know that we appreciate the commitment and the service to the community. There are some general feelings that really just some more visible street patrols and seeing cruisers perhaps on streets that they might not normally patrol, maybe taking the way less traveled a little more often, you know, instead of going up Clark Road or across Trafalgar, that maybe you're on, you know, Edmonton Street, or you're over on Bonaventure, or just changing up the patrol patterns so that you're seen in the neighborhood a little more visibly. So I wanted to share that with you. And I also want to respect your time, because we've already used up our whole hour and 4 extra minutes. I'm going to stick around for a couple of extra minutes and just provide people with a couple of more comments. Before I let you go, I did want to let you know that Amanda and I will be compiling everything from the video tonight in terms of the questions. And we will be forwarding that along to you, Constable Fickling, for the core unit, and we'll share it with you as well, PC Fountain, for the crime prevention unit. And certainly the time that you've given us tonight is appreciated. We want you to be able to get back on duty, but we also want to make sure that anything that we missed sharing with you tonight gets passed along. And I know that you're listening. I've had really good conversations both with Mr. Robson, who's the Police Association head, if folks don't know that, as well as with Chief Williams, and the mayor. And I had a chance to chat after council last night, and he's hearing these concerns from across the city as well. And he, of course, is on the police board. I know that one of the things that has popped up in the chat many times is, what can citizens do to get you the resources you need, and how can we help be part of the solution? And I think it's really important for folks to know that let not just me, but let the mayor know, because he is our council voice on the police services board, the frustrations that you're feeling as well. And we'll share those along. Of course, you're welcome to stick around for the last few minutes of the meeting if you want, but I suspect that you probably have other work that you need to get to tonight. So thank you for your time. I know that I have your emails, and I'm in contact with you regularly, as well as Sergeant Garwood from the core unit as well. So I appreciate the work that you've done in the last year for us, and will continue to do. So we'll let you go, officers, and have a good night and stay safe.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks for
organizing
having us.
this. Take care. Good night, everyone.
So I just want to come back to the folks who are still with us, and I know most of you are, to thank you for taking the time out tonight to share your thoughts and questions and some ideas and frustrations. I know we didn't get all the questions asked while the officers were here, but I hope that they were helpful. And I do want to thank my administrative assistant, Amanda, who came in tonight as well to help out. It's always nice to have the staff support on this, and giving her time in the evening to engage with the residents is great. I do see a couple hands up, so I will acknowledge those folks in just a moment. I'm going to stick around for about 10 minutes. I want to share a couple of other just community updates for you on things that are happening in the ward, because I think it's important for you to know. And since I've got you here, I want to take advantage of this opportunity to answer, or to provide a little bit of an update on one of the most asked questions I get all the time, which is what's going on with East Lyons Community Center. And I am going to get to that right after I share just a really brief update from council last night. Most of you probably know we have red light cameras at some of the intersections in the city, and those have been a help in terms of the police not having to be responding to traffic incidents at the same intersections at the same time all the time. Clark and Dundas, for example, is one of the locations. It's the only location in Ward 2, but it's the highest accident location in the ward. And last year, over 1,100 tickets were issued to drivers for running the red lights. And you don't get a ticket if your vehicle's in the intersection when the light's yellow. You have to be crossing that line when the light is red to get a ticket. So that's diverting some resources from the police by having the photos system do it itself, so we don't have to manage that intersection as heavily. Last night, council did pass the resolution to move ahead with photo radar. in the city. And that's going to help as well, because we do spend some time, and I can't share how many officers. The chief asked me, please not to do that, because we don't want the word getting out how many, but there are officers on every shift whose sole job it is to do traffic enforcement. And if we can take parts of the city away from them having to be assigned there for speeding in school zones and things like that, then that's a little more proactive, that they can be on things like the street racing. And folks probably have heard or seen just in the last week or so an increase in some stunt racing motorcycles on Clark and on Dundas. And I know that there are in other parts of the city too. So hopefully the photo radar will help us a little bit in terms of freeing up a few police resources to be a little more proactive on some of those problems. With the East Lyons Community Center, the good news is if you've been around the building at all in the last week or so, you'll notice that there's 20, 25 worker trucks in there every day for the last few days, and that is going to continue. We've cleared a lot of the hurdles. Some supplies that we've been desperately waiting to clear customs from the US have arrived, so they can start to fill in inside the ceiling tiles, which will let us turn on the HVACs and start working away at the gym floor. So I don't have an opening date for you yet, but I think we're getting close to being able to nail that down, and look forward to sharing it soon. And the other piece of that is the outside park space. If you've been around it, you know that the tennis courts, the pickleball courts, the basketball court are in, and we just got to get the chain link fence up around them and get the sod around them, and then we're going to be able to open those for use. The sod farm that supplies the city just opened Monday of this week to start sending us supplies. So we don't have it enough to do the East Lyons space yet, but we will have it in the next couple of weeks. We got to give the sod time to get rooted before we can open up the space, but we will be opening up that space soon. I have had to respectfully ask a couple groups of teenagers to put the fence back up and leave the basketball court, that it's not quite ready to use yet. And they have, but I know people are anxious to start using that space, and we will be opening up the park space as soon as possible, with the exception of the soccer field, which does have to have the seed down for a while before we can have games on it. But that is happening. We are finally making some real progress there. So that's all I'm going to talk about right now. I will take some other questions. Oh, I see Deb's popped up in the chat. The bank along Pottersburg Creek, where we had to take down some trees and do some protection of the sewer line and some creek bed mitigation of erosion is coming. We took the trees down early because we needed to avoid nesting season for the migratory birds and for the ducks. So that's going to be taking place most of the summer. It's slow work. We've got to be careful about disturbing any potential contamination in the soil as well. If folks who have lived in the area for a number of decades will know, the city has not been kind to Pottersburg Creek over the last, well, 75 years probably. And we have to make sure that we're doing soil samples, and that if there's any contamination, we're removing it in a safe way so that it's not getting back into the creek. So it's probably going to go most of the summer, Deb, and others in the Kiwanis Park area. I don't expect we will be wrapping that up much before the end of August. It's going to be slow going, but because there is a sanitary sewer line that runs very, very close to the creek itself, if we don't get the erosion mitigation done, then there's the potential for a sewer break to dump right into the creek, and that would be very bad. So I did want to, and I'm continuing to keep an eye on the chat here, lots of questions, but I want to go to, I'm going to ask Amanda to unmute Mark, who's had his hand up for quite a while. And I know Leslie has too, so we're going to go to that one as well. Amanda's going to send you some unmute requests, and then if you can just unmute yourself at the bottom and go ahead.
Leslie had her hand up first, so let her go first. I'm a gentleman. Let the lady go first.
Thank you, Mark. Leslie, did you want to go ahead?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I have a question. So basically the gist of this whole conversation, I'm kind of gathering that the police want us to just keep reporting these things, but that's a message that we've been getting for years now, and there isn't really an improvement. And I understand with COVID and everything and the outreach programs that the motels have been doing for the homeless, and I think that's fantastic. But with that said, why are we still dealing with these people that we've been told, oh, report, there'll be a higher traffic, there'll be more police presence, there'll be more police presence, there'll be more police presence. It's just a broken record at this point, and honestly, it's just words. And it really, it's getting to the point where we as a community are feeling the need to take things into our own hands. And I don't know if anybody else recalls from a couple years ago when there were segments on the news where high school children were acting out around Lucas area and I think White Oaks, and these people were getting so tired of it that this woman came on and said, I don't care if I go to jail. Like I'm defending myself, I'm defending my property. And I think it's getting to that point in this area. I know my neighbors and I have we have chats and we communicate back and forth all the time. Oh, keep a lookout, I saw someone up here, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, at what point do we give up on the justice system and the fact that the police are saying, oh, report and we'll have your back? I mean, it's a broken record and it's an empty promise.
Well, so one of the things I can say in response to that from a counselor point of view is the frustration. I get the frustration, and it is a frustration for me too. And I know report sounds like a broken record. And you know what, the first time in December that my vehicle, just this past December, got rummaged through, I didn't report it, and I should have. But I was like, oh, you know, it was a pair of sunglasses and a pair of gloves and a mess in my car, and it's not worth the police time. And then it happened a second time. And I did report it the second time and the third time. And one of the things that I got to tell you, the stats help with is making the case to the provincial government that we need more funding for our police services. And we have not necessarily been successful in making that appeal before. And I get the frustration, Leslie, that it feels like nothing is happening, but it's very hard to make the case to the senior levels of government. And unfortunately, when it comes to the justice system and the, you know, what I'm going to call the catch and release situation, where the police are just releasing people right back out, that is something that all of us, and I can't do it alone. I need all of you as residents to be writing our MP and our MPP, because our MPs dictate the criminal code and our MPPs legislate how the provincial court systems work. And so we need them to be hearing loud and clear that they need to take some action in Ottawa and in Queen's Park to address this too, because if we're just going to keep doing this, you know, more funding is not the answer if we're just going to continue to let people back out an hour after the police have detained them. And that's where the frustration is for me as a counselor too. Yeah, I know, and I saw it when I was on the ride along myself, where we took somebody down to the police station, and I know that person was back out the next day because I saw them at Argyle Mall. So that's where we need to speak loud and clear to our MPPs and our MPs to say, you guys need to step up too. And we do have a problem with, certainly, especially during COVID, the mental health and the addictions and the crime that's arising from that. And, you know, we've got that great big vacant space on the north side of Dundas right now, right at Highbury, where the old psychiatric hospital used to be. And certainly closing those psychiatric beds has turned out to be a very, very big mistake. Something that happened, you know, 30 years ago, and we're still paying the price for it now because the community supports never appeared. You know, they said, well, we don't want to institutionalize people. We want to integrate them and provide supports in the community. But those community supports never, ever appeared. And these folks now, and my number might be off a little bit. So, you know, don't quote me on the exact number. But for the shelter beds that we would normally have in the city for people who are homeless and maybe get some mental health services while they're there, we're down about 200 beds, I think, because COVID has said, well, Salvation Army, you can only use every other bed. Men's Mission, you can only use every other bed. And so the spaces where these folks might normally go and maybe get a little counseling and a little addiction support are half of what they were before the pandemic started because they can't have as many people in the building. So that is a problem as well, because we just don't have anywhere for them to go right now to get help either. And so it's spilling over into the neighborhoods in a way that it shouldn't be happening. I wish I had a better answer for you, but we've got to get on our MPs and MPPs to do something for us. Mark, I want to go to you quick, and then I'm just going to wrap up with folks. And I continue to see some comments popping up in the chats, and I do appreciate everybody's comments here. I haven't had a chance to read them all. Mark, just before we unmute you, I just want to let Cheryl know on Admiral, between Admiral and Trafalgar, with the flags and the paint markings and things that are popping up, those utility locates are there because we're doing a sewer relining along Admiral Drive this summer. It's not going to really have a big impact on the residents because most of the work is underground. We do have one little area where there will be a lane closure because we've got to put in a new maintenance hole so the workers can get down to do some repairs. But that'll be between Wexford and Dickens. And that's going to run until about the end of June. And then we should be pretty much wrapped up there. So that's what's happening there for this summer, is that we're going to be doing a little bit of sewer relining. And on the red light cameras and the photo radar, yes, we can meet the required time to have the warning signs up for the cameras in school zones because we can go ahead and post signs before the cameras even arrive. So we could get those signs up, Vicki, within the next couple of weeks and start counting down the 90 days before we can turn the cameras on. The very first thing we have to do now that council has passed that motion is we've got to actually activate the contract that we have with the camera supplier. That's a few pieces of documentation back and forth between the lawyers over the next week. And once that's done, we can go ahead and start getting signs in place in the zones where we're going to deploy them. And I will tell everyone, I am certainly going to be pushing for Wavell Street, where we have St. Pius and Prince Charles and the community center all made one of the first priorities because we are clocking people at 60 kilometers an hour in a 40 zone there on a daily basis. So that's hopefully one of the places we can get an early deployment. Amanda, can we unmute Mark so that he can ask his question? He's been very patient with us there, and I appreciate that, Mark.
No problem. You're talking about the red lights. Well, I think we need to have one here at Bonaventure and Dundas because I'll be in bed at night and I'll with my window open because I live on Dundas and Bonaventure. And the crime in this neighborhood is that I hear cars and motorcycles late at night going up and down, zipping up and down Dundas. And the other thing is, I think the police should, because I'm with a group, I have no problem voicing my opinion, having a voice, but my group, Division Advocates, is actually doing a sensitivity training with the police because we have gotten a complaint from people with disabilities that live in an apartment that police were mocking them. And so we're doing a sensitivity training with the police on a Tuesday afternoon, on a Tuesday morning. And I also work at a store, but the thing is, here in where I live, there's a no trespassing sign, and we've had people trespass on the property and breaking the sheds. So there's crime, like you said, there's crime everywhere, but here in our area, there's like cars zipping up and down, motorcycles. The speed humps don't even work because I've been on the bus and it's gone full speed over the speed humps. So even on Carlisle, I've noticed that.
Well, and I've had people say to me, well, don't do photo radar, just put in speed bumps. And even another member of council said that. And the reality is our traffic calming measures don't always work. Motorcycles can easily swerve through them. Some of the big, the F-150 and whatever pickup trucks can easily straddle them, and they don't slow down at all. So those aren't really getting the job done, and hopefully we can see a little bit of improvement. It seems like the only way we're going to get traffic, people who aren't going to follow the traffic rules under control, is to hit them in the wallet. Issue some tickets, and maybe after a couple of tickets in the mail, they will stop speeding in the areas, because they'll get notified where their tickets came from. And I've said this many times, and I said it again at council last night, to the people who are afraid photo radar is going to get them a ticket, then don't speed. The warning signs are going to be up. You know where those cameras are. Respect the speed limit, and it won't be a problem. You won't get a ticket. So I appreciate that, Mark, and I will share, and again, I can't share the details as to when, because Inspector Berg did ask me to not share those. But there was a blitz last fall by the police on the street racing and the illegal mufflers. And we did lay over, I think it was 150 charges under those two issues. And they are planning a spring blitz as well. So they are going to be going after those motorcycles and those stunt drivers who've got the illegal parts that they've had brought in from the US that rumble through and wake everybody up at midnight, and see if we can't, again, hit them in the wallet. That seems to be, unfortunately, the only message that gets through to some of those folks. So, and I see a lot of, just to wrap up here very quickly, yes to everybody who's saying, the mental health services are just not at the level they should be. They're not, and that's absolutely accurate. We are going to, and I do hope to have, to answer a question that's been asked a couple of other times, I do hope this is the first of an ongoing series of these opportunities to meet with people, both on this issue and on some of the other issues. If we can't get together in person, we can certainly do these kind of meetings, and sometimes it's actually more convenient to do them from the comfort of our own homes, or in my case, the comfort of the City Hall office, because I know the internet's more reliable here than it is at home some nights. So I do want to keep trying to do these as best we can, and I do appreciate the time that everybody put into this. And sorry, Richard, I will definitely make sure that I've got a better mic for the next event. It was working really well before the meeting, but if it has conked out on anybody and they haven't been able to hear me, I apologize for that. Next time I might have to get one of the headsets like Amanda's got on and speak a little more clearly for everyone. So always feel free to reach out to me by email. It's slewis@london.ca. I know a lot of you, I recognize some familiar faces tonight from folks who have followed me or commented on Facebook or other social media, and you're always welcome to be in touch, whether it's a phone call, a text, a Facebook message, an email. I can't always promise that I'm going to be able to answer instantly, and I might not always have the answer. I may have to get back to you in a couple days after I've had a chance to enlist Amanda's help to find the answers from our staff. but I will get back to you. And it is important for me to hear from you, both about this issue and about other issues that's going on around the city and in the ward. You know, it's my neighborhood too. And I know that both Constable Fickling and Fountain tonight, they're Argyle residents too. So it's not lost on us because it does impact us as well. And I know that we've got some challenges ahead, and we're not through COVID yet. But I want people to walk away tonight knowing that they're being heard. We're going to make sure that the chief gets a recording of tonight's meeting as well and give him a chance to review it. The other thing is we are working really hard to do some other positive things in the neighborhood, and whether that's the crosswalks that are going up to make it safer to walk around, whether that's the repairs that we're doing on roads and sewers and those things. There's a long list of things that the East End really has been waiting a while for that we need to get working on. Certainly people who have, and I've seen this come up a couple times, questions about how we can get streetlights on their street. I got to tell you, it is a process, much like the no parking zones or anything like that. And with streetlights, there is a cost, although you can spread it out over 10 years on your property tax bill, so it's not too much of a hit. But we will, by all means, email me with that request, and we will get the information to you. So thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. Stay safe. I know we keep saying this over and over. You hear it all the time. Follow the rules, you know, social distance, wear your mask, all that stuff. And I know people have different opinions about what works and what doesn't. Be sure to take your personal responsibility to the level that you're comfortable with and respect the others around you. Might have some different feelings about the situation and might have some different risk levels that you're not aware of. And just let's keep an eye out for each other. The safest, best thing we can do for our neighborhood is to be good neighbors for each other. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a great night. Thanks, Amanda, for staying late tonight. I owe you a coffee, and hopefully we'll hear from everybody again at the next meeting.